This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Fanalysts podcast, a show where we try to use logic in a pretty much logic-devoid situation. Nick, how was your fantasy week?
Not so good. I mean,
that's why that intro was the way it was.
It was
everything that you thought was logically going to happen just didn't happen for some reason.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. We made some good calls last week. Mm-hmm. We did make some good calls. I just wish I would have taken my own advice. I made the call of starting both Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb this week, and I started neither one of them.
There you go.
We made another call of the Cooper Kupp call didn't really work out, but we made another call of
Evan Ingram call didn't work out. My Logan Thomas call worked out kind of nicely given what you were paying for him.
Right, and we did make the call of looking at both Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic this week, and that worked out pretty well on both parties. So, I mean, we had a couple of good calls. I did start Antonio Gibson. You started J.D. McKissic, so we both went that route. But, we did have equally as bad calls with Aaron Jones and Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, calls that we felt we didn't have to make on the show.
Right. That ended up hurting us. So, I mean, in terms of, my DFS week, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible DFS-wise. My Yahoo League, I need 1.5 points out of Dalvin Cook tonight, and I will win yet again in my my yearly fantasy league. So that'll actually put me up at the top of the league too with this win tonight. So that'll be good. Yep. So I have roared on pretty good there. So crossing my fingers, knocking on wood that Dalvin Cook gets me at least 1.5 points tonight. Safe to say I'm pretty confident.
I mean, I've talked on the show about how we're in the league that I'm commissioned over, we're doing kind of like a hybrid style fantasy league in terms of hybrid between FanDuel and ESPN. So yeah, I'm not winning the league this week, but I would need 14 points from the Bears defense or at least get my head-to-head matchup.
I mean, that's entirely possible.
It can be done.
It can happen.
I'm not going to bank on it.
No, it can happen though. So I actually wanted to kind of get your opinion on something before we move into our regularly scheduled programming on this show. My question was, so considering most yearly fantasy leagues, as far as in terms of my perspective, at least, most yearly fantasy leagues have gone away with having your yearly dues this season because of how up in the air everything's been, and with players being out and in and out and in, games being moved around. A lot of leagues, from what I've seen, have just said this year's a free year, it's a wash. What would you say about allowing the top two teams to have their option of their picks in next year's drafts once things go back to normal?
So you have some kind of stake,
so you have some kind of
reward.
Incentive, some kind of reward for winning the season, or at least placing in top two. Obviously, the champion would get the first pick the pick that they want, and the second place team would get the pick that they want. You could even break it down as far as your entire division, your entire standings go, for all I care. But that way it would give you something to focus on come playoff time. It gives you a reason to want to win, because then when things do end up going back to normal next year, fingers crossed, but do end up going back to normal next year, your league fees are reinstated. You are playing for money again. It gives you something to at least be playing for this year to make it not entirely a wash.
Yeah, having your pick of picks is a good way to do it without weighting the best team too much. Because if you were to say you get an extra keeper, that'd be putting too much weight on it, because the person already has the best team. One other way you could do it, I would say, is waiver priority. So the top two teams get automatic top two waiver priority for week one next season. But I do think the pick of picks is an interesting way to go about it. Now, it wouldn't work in the league I'm in currently, the one that I'm not commissioner of, because the way they do the draft already is pick of picks. So everyone submits their top three picks or pick positions that they want, and the commissioner sorts it out based on that. I hate it.
What?
But
that sounds awful.
Yeah. Again, all right, I'm not commissioner of this league.
Wow, that sounds absolutely awful. I love picking the worst, the second to last or fourth to last in the draft. I guess that's really not even a bad spot. I love picking number one. No, I would never want that, ever. But I felt like that was a way to, it was just an idea that I had, and I might pitch it to the person who is the commissioner in this league. It felt like a way that, adds some weight to the season without making it for money, because obviously the season isn't for money.
Yeah.
And that way it makes it a little bit more fun. It makes it worth something going into next year, because this league has the same people every year anyways, so it would make sense. So
the commissioner of that league, he actually decided that it has been calm enough that he's going to keep the buy-in. He's going to keep it as a money league for this year. I disagree.
I disagree wholeheartedly. We had 20 matchups get moved from week to week.
Yeah.
I disagree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. But I don't get say in that league. So,
well, there you go. No, I think that's I think COVID and everything has had enough of an impact on the season to where I really don't think you should. It's obviously my personal opinion. Some people are diehards, and it doesn't matter what you deal with. We play for money here.
Yeah.
We play for keeps, but I personally just felt like this year was a year where it was right to kind of back off that a little bit. And I would have made, if I was commissioner of this league, I would have made the same decision. Hold on to your money. We'll wait and see how things play out. And as soon as we started to see games being pushed around and the amount of confusion from the fantasy leagues, I would have said no. Just keep your money. This year's a wash. But so,
out of curiosity, in your league, was there ever any discussion about doing DFS this year?
No, they've stayed. So the reason was because I will say this. I brought it up to him along with another person in the league did bring it up to him. He said he would think about it, but I don't really think he ever gave it any kind of actual thought. And the reason I say that is because I really don't think it would have been very popular in the league, because this league has been run on Yahoo for probably about 15 years now. As long as I know of, this year has had
so they're traditionalists.
This year has had the same format, same scoring style, it's been run on the same site forever. So it's I don't know that it'll ever change. I've tried lobbying to have it changed. It's because I personally I'm not in love with Yahoo's setup. I don't I don't love the way they do things, but I tried pitching the change there last season, and I tried pitching the change this year, but I'm one of the newer bloods in the group as it is, so I really don't have much say. I have tried to lobby for some scoring changes this year, and I'm hoping to get some of them passed in the offseason. But regardless, it was gonna stay the way they have it, no matter what.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine. I mean, traditionalists, they have they have what they have, and they like it, and that's fine. So, but I personally would have preferred a DFS route this year just because of what we've had to deal with.
Yeah.
But it's not like this season hasn't been fun. I still enjoy playing fantasy football, and the yearly fantasy football, it kind of scratches that itch a little bit because I obviously get my DFS weekly with the few contests that I enter weekly, but it scratches the yearly fantasy itch. Because one of my favorite parts of fantasy football is the draft.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't really have that with DFS. You don't have it at all, really. So to be able to have the draft and still get to experience that was obviously pretty fun for me. So
yeah, I've really enjoyed, because the leader commissioner of that hybrid thing that we implemented, I've really enjoyed it. It adds an extra level of competitiveness to the standard DFS contest because you have a specific person you're going against each week as well. But it has pissed me off to no end this year because I've never been in a situation where I'm the second highest scoring team in the league and be 3-6. It makes me so angry.
Yeah, that would be annoying.
And now I'm about to be 3-7 after this week if Bears defense doesn't get 14 points.
I mean, a 3-7 record is like borderline out of the playoffs.
I'm probably already out of the playoffs.
Yeah, you're very possibly there. That's a rough go. That's a rough go. You obviously very much have the most points against, I'm assuming, at that point.
Oh, by far.
So
I think I've faced the winner of the week 5 times this season out of 9 games.
Ouch. Ouch.
And then one of the other times I won, and then there was just 3 times where I didn't face the winner.
I mean, there's years like that. There's years that happens. It is what it is. There's nothing you can really do about it. Obviously, I've been on that side where it sucks. You seemingly face the hottest team of the week every single week, and you put up a ton of points, but it just doesn't matter.
Yep, exactly.
I've had seasons where I far and away had the most points against, and it was brutal.
And the worst part is, like, because I'm a commissioner, so like every Tuesday I go into our league page and I go and update the scoring based on what everyone got in FanDuel and update it for the head-to-head matchups. And then like I'll have like a week where I put up like 150 and lost, and then I'll input someone who put up like 107 and won their matchup. Like, you bastard.
So it's kind of like getting kicked in the nuts, and then someone else comes up and punches you in the nuts again.
Exactly, because I have to sit and tally everyone that got to win with way less points than I had.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's brutal.
But and we're coming up on now, like after these next few weeks, I think what make the biggest advantage of doing this hybrid style in the fact that once you get to playoff time, it's still competitive for everyone else because you still have that normal FanDuel lead that you're trying to win the money for every single week. So like people are still like normally once playoff time comes, you're not in playoffs, you have like a month where you're not paying attention to fantasy football anymore. But this gives an incentive for everyone to be competitive every single week, even into the playoffs.
Right, and that is kind of an interesting way to do things, and I do like that idea for that reason. It keeps people engaged. It forces people to still pay attention each week unless they just don't care about their money,
exactly.
which is possible. I mean, there are some people out there who just don't. But
everyone paid up front, so if they don't care, then that's fine.
I mean, it is what it is, right. So I'm curious, though, and I'm pretty sure you've mentioned this on the show, on a previous episode of the show, but your league has keepers, right?
Yes.
So are you guys just holding your keepers from the previous year?
So what it is we so what the way our keepers work is you get them for 2 years after the year you drafted them. So you get them for additional 2 years, and each year it's you take it's minus 1 round where they were drafted.
Right.
So what we did is we put a pause on the clock, so to speak. So you have an extra year to keep your keeper. However, that countdown of the rounds does not stop. So it's still, so let's say, like, for example, I drafted Mark Andrews. So it'll cost
you 2 rounds this year, 3 rounds next year.
So yeah, because I drafted Mark Andrews in like the 9th round last year, I believe it was. And then this year I would have got him in the 8th, but we didn't have one. And the next year would have been my last year to keep Mark Andrews, which would have been the 7th. Now I get him for an extra year, and I get to keep him in the 6th, 2 years down the road if I wanted to.
That's early for a tight end.
Yeah. I might keep him next year, and that's about it.
No, that's not a bad idea. I can see why you would want to go that route, and and holding your rosters from the previous year to make sure you get your keepers. And you guys only have 1 keeper, right?
Yeah, just one keeper.
So that's not a terrible idea. What round do you guys get rid of? What round do you count for waiver pickups?
5th round, which I think is too high. But that's like I put it up to. I wanted to change it this year before like all the COVID stuff happened. I wanted to change it for this season. I put it up to vote, and 5th round stuck.
I mean, 5th round is really not that bad. Mm-hmm. It's on the higher end of where I am comfortable with, but it's. Really,
I wanted 7th round. That's
because
where I was.
7th round is a really good one. I'd say 6th round is kind of a sweet spot, but 7th round is a good one in my opinion too. 5th round's on the higher end, but I'm still kind of comfortable with it. And the reason is because if you pick up a guy on waivers and he's good enough to keep, he obviously is someone who's going to get drafted in the top 5 rounds regardless.
That's the logic that most of the league has is if he's good enough to keep, 5th round is worth it. Right.
And examples of that would be like when Alvin Kamara came onto the scene for the Saints. That was a guy that, because of, he'd be your keeper, you picked him up off waivers likely, or got him at the very end of the draft if you were smart and lucky, but picked him up off waivers, and then he went in the top 3 rounds the next year. So he's a guy that's a perfect example of why that keeper is as expensive as it is.
Yep, and he was a 3-year keeper in our league because of that.
I'm not surprised by that. I absolutely would be keeping him every single year. That's the number 1 running back in fantasy football. That's a top 3 pick in every league almost. And yeah, I would take him in the 5th, 4th, and 3rd for sure.
And I still remember the day. I had the 2nd waiver, and there was one owner in front of me who had the 1st spot in the waiver wire, and he texts me, and he goes, "You think I should take Kamara?" And I wanted to take Kamara. I'm like, I don't know. I think it was kind of fluky. Like, hoping you pass up on him again and I can get him. Didn't work.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, he obviously, people fantasy players are obviously glad to have him if they were able to hold on to him. So, but
Yeah.
So wait, is next year the last year they get to keep him then?
No, I believe their last year was this previous year.
Okay.
It's their last year
Okay.
keeping Kamara. But speaking of waivers, should we get into our
Yeah, let's
waiver
go ahead
wires?
and move on into waivers.
All right. I only have 3 this week.
I as well only have 3. They're all like deep waivers too. It's fun.
I'll give you my favorite one right off the bat because this is the only one that I view as like a long-term option,
Okay.
and that's wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. from the Indianapolis Colts. He's 5% owned. He's led the team in targets. Well, he did lead the team in targets this past week with 8 targets. He turned that into 7 catches for 101 yards. He also had 7 targets the previous week. So he could be becoming the lead pass catcher on this team. At least I think so. And this is a team that really doesn't have a lead pass catcher right now. T.Y. Hilton's been having a terrible year. And what's his face? God, I'm blanking. Zach Pascal. He's been on and off at best. And then there was one other guy that I can't quite grab his name right now. But anyway, no one has really stepped up in this receiving core. And I think Michael Pittman is starting to take the spotlight there. So I think he's a guy you could definitely take a look at in the waiver wire.
I've got Michael Pittman on my list as well, and I do think, like you mentioned, he is a long-term option. I do have actually 2 long-term options, though, but I do think Michael Pittman's a guy who is a must-add right now. He's really solidified his role as one of the top pass catchers on that team, if not the top pass catcher on that team. You know, nobody else in that team really has stepped up in the way that he has, and I think that's a lot to do with Phillip Rivers likes his big receivers, always has, and Michael Pittman being 6'4" really kind of fits into that mold. So I think Michael Pittman is a guy you really want to pick up right now, and like you mentioned, he is only 10% owned and rostered in CBS leagues, so he's a guy I would definitely be looking at.
Marcus Johnson was the guy I was thinking of. He was a guy that popped like a couple games and disappeared again.
I gotcha.
Yep.
My other waiver ad here, and I actually have one at each position, not including tight end. So I have a quarterback here. Quarterback Jameis Winston for the Saints, 2% owned in Yahoo, and he is the other guy I consider to be a long-term option. And the reason is because he is going to be the starting quarterback pretty much up until the playoffs because Drew Brees has multiple broken ribs and a collapsed lung, so he's going to be out for a while. And New Orleans actually has a pretty favorable schedule moving forward. They have 2 games against the Falcons, including one this upcoming week, one against the Eagles and one against the Vikings. So they have a very favorable schedule moving forward coming into into fantasy playoffs, and I believe even in fantasy playoffs, I believe the Vikings game is. But he's got a favorable schedule, and he's got weapons on that team with Kamara, with Michael Thomas, with Jared Cook. He's got weapons to throw the football to, some of the best in the league. And it's not like this guy hasn't put up fantasy points in the past. He's an experienced quarterback who's put up a ton of fantasy points in the past. I believe he was a top 5 quarterback last year, wasn't he, in fantasy?
It was 2 years ago, or it could have been last year.
I don't remember, but either way, he puts up a ton of fantasy points. Even though he turns the ball over like crazy, he still throws a lot of touchdowns, throws for a lot of yards. So he's a guy that you absolutely would be looking at owning. If you need a quarterback right now, that's a guy I'd be targeting big time on the waiver with the schedule he's got moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. That's the quarterback I have as well. And I highlight the fact on my end, like you said, that he gets Atlanta twice over the next 3 weeks. And kind of the main reason I view him as more of a short-term option because there is that chance that Drew Brees comes back after 3 weeks, but that's more on the optimistic side. So he could very well turn into a long-term option. So I agree with you on that. But just the fact that more than likely he's going to be a starting quarterback for 2 games against Atlanta is already enough for me to say go ahead and pick him up.
Absolutely. Do you want to take third or do you want me to take third?
I'll take it. This last guy I don't love. I'll be honest with you. The only reason I'm putting him up here is more of a spot start for next week, and it's Salvin Ahmed from the Miami Dolphins.
Exactly what I got.
7% owned in the ESPN league. He gets to face a Broncos D that just got popped for 112 and 2 touchdowns by Josh Jacobs. And right now, he looks to be the sole back in that backfield.
I was going to say he is the only one.
But as soon as people start coming back, I hesitate to say that he's going to have as strong of a workload. But he had a good game last week. I believe it was like 21 for 84. But I think at the very least next week, he's still going to get the start against a very vulnerable Broncos run defense. So he could be a waiver pickup streamer.
Absolutely a guy that you could possibly look at least this upcoming week. And I don't really know about Ford because I'm curious about the rostering of that backfield. How long is Myles Gaskin out for? Do they put him on IR?
I can check. I do know Breida comes back. I think next week or in 2 weeks, but either way, I don't expect him to eat into his carries too much.
I really don't either. But Salvin Ahmed did have 85 yards and 21 carries and a touchdown last week. He doesn't really factor into the passing game as much, so there is that aspect that's kind of a negative. But
yeah, he is on IR, by the way.
Okay, but Jordan Howard was a scratch, a healthy scratch last week, even though Myles Gaskin and Matt Breida were out. So that tells me right now that they are comfortable giving Salvin Ahmed the keys to the backfield in Miami, and that's a backfield that honestly they're fighting for a playoff spot right now. I believe they're a 6-3 football team, 3-0 under Tua Tagovailoa. So that's a team that's really trying to fight. So giving the keys
surpassed my expectations
by 6 games. They gave him the keys to a backfield that is competing right now. So that means that they trust him implicitly for the time being. So that's a guy that at least this upcoming week I'd be looking at adding, and I'd definitely be looking at possibly playing him in DFS this weekend as well. Yeah. So look at him as a possibility if you need a running back. Yeah. But that's all I got for waivers.
Let's move on to starts and sits.
Let's do it.
You want to take the first one?
Yeah, I can do that. Starting with quarterback, I've got, one of the top starts of the week is going to be Lamar Jackson going up against the Titans. Titans are third worst in the league against QBs. They give up a ton of points there. I do think that this game could be it plays itself into the Ravens' hand. Them having the better defense against an offense that may not be as good, but the Titans' defense is bad. So look for the Ravens to have a possibility of putting up some points. Lamar Jackson being the dual-threat quarterback he is, you may see some flashes of what he did last year in this game against the Titans. So he's one of my top starts at quarterback this week.
I'm going Ben Roethlisberger against Jacksonville. Jacksonville's allowing 23.7 fantasy points per game to the QB position. Fun fact, they've allowed every QB they've faced to either throw for 300 plus yards or multiple touchdowns or both. The lone exception is Matthew Stafford, who did neither.
Who really hasn't had that great of a season.
Yeah. But Roethlisberger has weapons and ability to do both, in my opinion, so he's my start of the week.
Roethlisberger was my other start, pretty much highlighting everything you just said. The Jags defense is terrible against quarterbacks, fourth worst in the league. I think Ben Roethlisberger has an opportunity to put up big points this week. We're starting to see Juju Smith-Schuster come alive, which is kind of a surprise at this point in the year. Plus, he's got weapons galore there in Pittsburgh that he loves to throw the ball to. So I think Ben Roethlisberger's got a really good shot this week for sure.
My second start of the week, someone we just talked about, Jameis Winston. And I'm playing the matchup here, to be honest with you, against Atlanta. Falcons are allowing the most fantasy points per game to the QB position. Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater each threw for 300 plus and 2 touchdowns, and Nick Foles hung 3 touchdowns on this team. So I think Winston should definitely be able to deliver a strong performance, and he's probably going to be a really good value play in DFS as well.
All right. Sits over here. I've got Aaron Rodgers up against the Colts. Now, mind you, this is more of a buyer beware with Aaron Rodgers because obviously he's Aaron Rodgers. He's having a fantastic season, but the Colts are fourth best in the league against quarterbacks, and they're not a fun defense to go up against. They also love to control TOP. That's the other big one with the Colts is they limit the other team's quarterbacks by controlling the time of possession and having the football in their hands a lot more than the other team. So Aaron Rodgers may have a little bit of a down week this week just because of that, and mixed with the fact that their defense is also pretty damn good.
You did what I was too scared to do. I really wanted to make Aaron Rodgers this week, but I'm too scared.
It's more of a buyer beware than a sit.
No, I agree with it. I
didn't love the matchup at all.
This is a full-blown sit, in my opinion. Tom Brady against the Rams. The Rams are a nightmare matchup for both QBs and wide receivers, to be honest with you. They've only allowed 1 passing touchdown in the last 3 games, and that includes this past week against Russell Wilson, who has a similarly strong receiving core to Tom Brady in Tampa, but they shut him out. So I think it's going to be a long afternoon for Brady and company. So he's my sit of the week.
My next sit is actually going to be Deshaun Watson up against the Patriots. Patriots are second best in the league at giving up points to quarterbacks. They are very stingy with their defense, and I don't even. The Patriots are an enigma to me because I don't understand it. Their roster isn't one that just jumps off the page to me and say, "Oh, that defense is elite." But they just don't give up points to quarterbacks in any way, or really just don't give up a lot of points in general. And it's not like their offense is any good either. So I just don't understand that Patriots team really at all on the defense side of the ball. But regardless of that fact, they are a really good defense, and they have been shutting down quarterbacks. So Deshaun Watson is one of my sits this week for that reason.
I mean, I could pick I don't have another sit of the week, but I think part of what's happening with the Patriots, why it doesn't make so much sense. I do think they haven't faced the strongest quarterback group this season. But then again, in week 8, that's why I thought Josh Allen was going to have a good game against them, and he actually got shut down. But like earlier in the season, they allowed Russell Wilson to over 5 touchdowns against them. They allowed Pat Mahomes to go for 250 and 2. So like we
are talking about the 2 best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, they've been beat by better, but the rest of the group that they've been shutting down are guys like Drew Lock, Jimmy Garoppolo, Joe Flacco, Derek Carr. It's not an inspiring group, but I do believe that there is some buyer beware potential here with Deshaun Watson, just because of what they were able to do with Josh Allen. That scares me. So.
I mean, they did shut down Lamar Jackson as well as Josh Allen. So there's been some good quarterbacks that they have kept quiet this season. So, but
I agree with you.
Where'd my notes go? There they are. Okay, my other that was my 2 sits of the week. So
I've never sit. So
running backs.
Yep, I'm gonna go DeAndre Swift against Carolina.
I like it. I got it too.
DeAndre Swift finally got that starting job this past week, and he blew up with nearly 150 total yards and a touchdown. He gets to take that momentum into a matchup against the Panthers D that's bottom 5 against the run. They just allowed Rojo to go for nearly 200 yards and a touchdown. I think it's a smash play this week.
I think the Lions have finally figured out their backfield, and by that I mean they realize that, hey, we have one really good running back and a couple of guys that are not so good, so let's feed the guy who's really good. And that's DeAndre Swift, and he's one of my starts of the week this week too, and especially in DFS plays because I don't think he's going to be all that expensive. Panthers are 8th worst against running backs this year, and they're a defense that you can run on and make plays. So I think DeAndre Swift, once again, now that they finally understand and learned who the guy is in that backfield, I think he's going to get tons of opportunity this week, and he's going to be successful. So he's one of my starts of the week, but my other start of the week, and I trusted him a couple of weeks ago, and he burned me. But I'm going to trust him again because this defense is bad against the run. And it's James Conner going up against the Jaguars. I know. But the Jaguars are 5th worst against running backs, and we've seen tons of different running backs just burn this Jags defense. I thought Aaron Jones was going to do it. He didn't do it. But guys like DeAndre Swift have. And I think the fact that James Conner is that big-time dual threat back there, he is going to be a factor in the passing game as well as the running game. And I expect the Steelers to also be out front in this game, which means more carries for James Conner and more opportunity for him to be successful. So I think James Conner's got a big opportunity this upcoming week against the Jaguars.
My next start of the week is Mike Davis versus Detroit. Now last week I pretty emphatically told you guys to sit Mike Davis, and for some reason a lot of the so-called fantasy gurus, experts, not only did they not agree with me, they made him a start of the week, which boggles my mind. He didn't do anything. So but against Detroit, I think it's going to be a completely different story. Lions, like I said last week,
they're so bad against running backs.
Yeah, and they're getting worse. Is what's the problem.
They allowed guys like Antonio Gibson put up like 20-something points against them this week.
They're allowing 30 fantasy points per game to the position, which is by far
that's
the worst
many.
in the league.
That's so many.
Also allowing the most running back touchdowns in the league. They're also allowing 4.9 yards per carry, damn near 5 yards a carry. Davis is the What's up?
Was the Jaguars game the last game they didn't allow 2 touchdowns to a running back?
I can find that out in about 2 seconds after I finish my spiel.
Yeah, go ahead. You know what? You finish the spiel. I'll find it out.
So Mike Davis is the unquestioned lead back in his backfield with CMC out. Now, he didn't get the volume last week, I think largely because of the matchup. I do believe that the coaching staff realized you're not going to get anything done on the ground against Tampa. I think he should get back to his normal volume this week. Combine that with the fact that the Lions are allowing 4.9 yards per carry on the season and just how bad overall they've been against the run. It's hard to envision a scenario where Mike Davis doesn't give you a positive return on your investment this week. So I go Mike Davis as my start of the week.
I absolutely 100%, 1,000% agree with that. Fun fact, the Lions have only had 3 games this year. I was right. The Jags game was the last one. They didn't give up 2 touchdowns to running backs. But the Lions have only had 3 games this year where they allowed only 1 touchdown or less to running backs. And the Jaguars was the last one. I believe the Cardinals game. Yes, the Cardinals game was the previous one.
Which
and
that game still boggles my mind.
I know.
don't know.
And then you have to go all the way back to week 1 against the Bears where they had 0 touchdowns at the running back position. So needless to say, the Lions are terrible against the run and against running backs in particular because they allow multiple touchdowns. And a lot of these weeks, they allowed 3 or more touchdowns to running backs. So that's pretty bad.
Yeah, you look at week 7, that's 2 touchdowns. Week 8, 3 touchdowns. Week 9, 3 touchdowns. This last week, 3 touchdowns. Like it's bad.
It's ugly in Detroit when it comes to stopping running backs. So I absolutely would be pumping Mike Davis this week. I think there's a couple of cheaper running backs this week that I would love to start in DeAndre Swift and Mike Davis. So you could be going cheap on running back and big money at receiver this week. Sits of the week I've gotten, this is again a buyer beware more than anything, and I think this has to do with more of game flow than anything. And it's Derrick Henry against the Ravens.
Don't have the same person.
Derrick Henry against the Ravens. I just don't think this is a game where he could see a ton of opportunity because I think the Ravens will control most of this game just because I think they match up well against this Titans team. I like the Titans. I just don't think they match up against this Ravens team very well. I don't know that Derrick Henry is going to be that successful. The Ravens are 12th best in the league against running backs. And I think the Titans have hit a little bit of a cold streak right now. And Derrick Henry is one that, normally when you see these top running backs, they don't tend to have dud weeks. They're guys you can comfortably start every week, and a bad week for them is still a double-digit point total. Well, Derrick Henry's a guy who in a bad week is a straight-up dud. So that's another reason why it's more of a buyer beware. He could be a flat-out bad player this week. But, again, he's a must-start. However, I don't love the matchup against the Ravens this one. I do have one more, too. So I'm curious if the other one we have is the guy.
That might be. But I'm going to level with you. After last week where he put up 100-plus yards in the Colts, I'm starting to think he's matchup-proof, man.
It is entirely possible. But if you look at his schedule, if you look at what he's done this year, and just throughout history, I mean, and again, though, they controlled that game against the Colts.
So his worst game, fantasy output-wise, was Chicago, which, okay, that's a good run defense. The one that doesn't make sense to me
against the Colts. Just kidding.
Yeah, they did. But the one that doesn't make sense to me is Jacksonville. I don't know why he only got 8.4 points against Jacksonville.
Right. I mean, he may be matchup proof. However, like I said, it's a guy you start every week, but I consider him a buyer beware this week just because I don't think that the game flow is going to go in the Titans' favor this week against the Ravens. I feel
that.
I have a feeling that the Ravens could be controlling this game a little bit.
My sit of the week is going to be Aaron Jones against the Colts.
That's who I've got, yes.
Yep.
That's the other one.
Indy's been bottling up running backs, not named Derrick Henry. They're only allowing 3.4 yards per carry on the season, and the only team allowing less than that is Tampa, who have been insane against running backs this year. They've also largely kept running backs out of the end zone, only allowing 0.4 touchdowns per game to the position. Meanwhile, Aaron Jones himself has been on a slump since returning from injury, averaging only 3.7 yards per carry. He's only been getting about 14 carries per game over the last 2 games since returning from injury, so he doesn't seem to be 100%. So I think he's going to be limping into a brick wall this week against Indy, so he's my sit of the week.
I have him as my sit of the week as well. They're third best against running backs for a reason, and that's an extremely tough matchup in a game that I think they're going to be having to throw the football a lot. I don't love the matchup for Aaron Jones, and like you mentioned, he hasn't been great since he returned, so that's another reason to sit him down. Moving on to receivers, though. Start of the week for me at receiver is I've got Terry McLaurin, and mind you, I took out the top receivers. There's ones up top that are just obvious.
DeAndre Hopkins sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yes, he absolutely does. But I have Terry McLaurin going up against the Bengals. The Bengals are 7th worst in the league against wide receivers. It's just it's a matchup where I think this guy all season long, regardless of who is his quarterback, is extremely successful. And I've been preaching that all season long. As soon as we saw them take away Dwayne Haskins, as soon as we saw Kyle Allen go in there, and then we saw him go down, I've been saying it, stick with Terry McLaurin. Do not panic. He's going to be fine. And I've been right. Terry McLaurin against the Lions had he didn't score, but he had 7 catches for 95 yards. He was very successful against them. I think he will be against the Bengals, and I think he'll do even better against the Bengals this week. He's clearly Alex Smith's top target, and that's going to continue throughout the rest of the year. So Terry McLaurin's got a great opportunity this week.
I agree with that, and I actually have him at the start of the week as well. And I actually took a little more recency bias on this one with the Bengals. I took a look at their last 5 weeks, and over the last 5 weeks, they're only one of 2 teams that are allowing both 200-plus yards and 2 touchdowns to the wide receiver position over that span. And if you just look at last week, they just allowed Deontay Johnson, Juju, and Chase Claypool to combine for 250 and 4 touchdowns. So I think that passing unit is actually becoming one to attack. So I agree with you on the Terry McLaurin start, and he's also one of my starts of the week. I'll give you my next guy is Justin Jefferson against Dallas. Dallas, I mean, we all know is all around terrible against the pass, allowing 30.1 points per game to the wide receiver position. They've also allowed 1.8 wide receiver touchdowns per game, which is second only to the team that are facing in the Vikings. So this could be a bit of a shootout.
Granted, but who's the Cowboys quarterback? It may not be a shootout for that reason.
It actually might be A. Dalton this week from what I'm hearing.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Well, then maybe it could be a shootout.
But the interesting thing here is who's getting it done against his secondary. In week 1, it was Woods that went for 100+, not Kupp. In week 2, it was Ridley who went for 109 and 2, not Julio. In week 3, it was Lockett who went for 103 touchdowns.
Hurt in week 2, though?
No, he played. He actually had a pretty decent game, but not quite what Ridley was doing. In week 3, it was Lockett who went for 103 touchdowns, although DK still had a strong game there as well. You also saw it in week 6 against the Cardinals where Christian Kirk went for 86 and 2 while Hop was held to 73 and no touchdowns. So while Adam Thielen could very well have a strong performance here, I'm not going to say he won't. I'm just going to lean on the side of history here and say I'm going with Justin Jefferson in this matchup as my start of the week.
That's, I went ahead and said I'm going to start both of them this week. I have both on my list as a start of the week for the against the Cowboys. I just feel like this Vikings team is seemingly kind of getting things right at the right time. And that means with their offense, not their defense. But I think their offense is finally hitting a stride, and it started through the run, and now their passing game's kind of following right behind. I think Thielen and Justin Jefferson are going to be solid plays this week. I do lean a little bit Justin Jefferson, especially in DFS, because I think he's going to be quite a bit cheaper than Adam Thielen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But I think both have an opportunity to have a really good week. The Cowboys' defense is absolutely terrible. So move on to tight ends. Or no, sits of the week. Sorry, sits. Yep. My sit of the week, and again, this more of a buyer beware. But I've got A.J. Brown going up against the Ravens. Ravens are 6th best in the league against wide receivers.
Brown's had such a tough stretch of games.
He absolutely has, and it's gonna continue this week because the Ravens secondary is a mean one. They're very they're very tough, very very strong defense. I don't love the matchup for A.J. Brown. He's gonna be they're gonna put the clamps on. If the Titans want to win this game, Titans want to win this game, they're gonna have to control TOP and do it on the ground. So don't think A.J. Brown's gonna have a good game.
I made Tom Brady my start of the week at QB. I'm making both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin my sit of the week. I mean,
we're kind of on the same page this week. Yeah, I like it.
the Rams are the best pass defense in the league, and it's not even close. They're only allowing a total of 15.4 fantasy points per game in the wide receiver position.
Technically speaking, the Washington football team secondary was the best last week.
Yeah, until
the Rams are better, yes.
Because that is a whole point per game less than the Ravens and the Bears, and a whole 2 points per game less than the Washington football team as of the end of week 10. Well, outside of Monday, obviously, but as of week 10. The only wide receiver that was able to sniff 100 yards against his pass defense was Cole Beasley for some reason. But
that's an anomaly.
they had their biggest test of the season. This is where all the guys were on their pass defense was against the Seahawks this week, and they passed that test with flying colors. They held Metcalf and Lockett to combine 94 yards and no touchdowns. So I don't expect Evans and Godwin to fare much better, to be honest with you. That's why they're my sits of the week.
I mean, Godwin's also dealing with an injury, so he's already going to be hampered. So I'm actually curious who they're going to put Marcus Peters on in this game.
Yeah.
For that reason, they may not need him on Godwin. They may lean him more towards Mike Evans. Antonio Brown actually had a sneaky solid week this past week, though, so he may be becoming more of an option in that offense. But either way, I am sitting every Bucs receiver this upcoming week. I don't love the matchup at all. The Rams defense it's top notch. It's top of the line against wide receivers. I absolutely hate the matchup 100%.
I agree.
Moving on to tight ends here. I've got Austin Hooper as the start of the week going up against the Eagles. They are 4th worst in the league against tight ends. They just seemingly give up points all over the place to tight ends, and Austin Hooper is a guy who I think has an opportunity to be successful and have a big week as one of the bigger options for Baker Mayfield in that pass catching core. So I think Austin Hooper's got a good opportunity against the Eagles this week.
I'm going Logan Thomas against Cincy.
Going back to back with Logan Thomas.
You may be thinking about Logan Thomas truther at this point, but he's had by far the worst defense against tight ends over the last 5 weeks, allowing 15.2 fantasy points per game to the position. And that's facing guys like Trey Burton, Harrison Bryant, Anthony Frisker, Eric Ebron. So I think Logan Thomas should just fine and be a strong value play this week at tight end.
Absolutely. My next start of the week at tight end is Jared Cook going up against Falcons. This Falcons defense is abysmal against tight ends. They are the worst in the league overall this season against tight ends. And Jared Cook has a big opportunity. And yes, I know Drew Brees is out. However, Jameis Winston's going to step right in and be comfortable against that bad Falcons defense that's going to get just dumped all over by the likes of Michael Thomas, Jared Cook, and Alvin Kamara all game long. And I expect Jared Cook to go for at least 50 and a touchdown this week. So I would definitely be looking to play him. He's going to have a good opportunity.
I had Jared Cook as well. And one thing I'll add is with Jameis Winston at quarterback, I think it's going to be a big factor because according to Pro Football Focus, since entering the NFL, Jameis Winston has had the 5th best passer rating when targeting tight ends, but he ranks 3rd worst when targeting all other positions, which is the largest discrepancy among all quarterbacks over the stretch. Very
interesting stat.
So he loves his tight ends, and he tends to be successful in throwing to him, and I think he knows that. So I do think he's going to be targeting Jared Cook quite a bit in this game.
Definitely agree. I mean, he's been spoiled at the tight end position in his career, having both Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard there throughout. So, and throwing Jared Cook there spoils him even more, in my opinion.
But it's not like he hasn't been spoiled the wide receiver position either.
Right. He has had, he did have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and I believe Vincent Jackson.
Vincent Jackson.
Yes. I was going to say, was Vincent Jackson there in the beginning of his career? Yep. I can't remember, but he has been spoiled in terms of weapons. We'll just go that route. And he's even more spoiled now with Alvin Kamara, Jared Cook, and Michael Thomas. So I think he's going to have an opportunity to be successful here. Sits this week, I've got Rob Gronkowski going up against the Rams. And I understand the Rams really aren't the greatest against tight ends. They're, I believe, somewhere around, they're very middle of the road. Let's just go with that. Very middle of the road against tight ends. But however, that defense as a whole is just extremely good. And I think they may take guys like Gronk out of this game entirely. I don't see a bunch of opportunity for Gronkowski in this game. If they're going to win, they're going to have to do it with their big-time playmakers. Between Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans, I don't know that Gronk's going to be able to be the guy to make the most of the opportunity. So I think the Bucs offense as a whole is just going to be shut down this week against a really good Rams D.
I'm actually going to go Darren Waller against Kansas City. And this is
my other guy.
This is probably going to be zigging where a lot of people's at because I have a feeling that just like Mike Davis last week, I think a lot of people are going to be calling Darren Waller to start for some reason. I don't know why. But for me, sticking with the recency analysis I did with Cincy, the Chiefs have been a top 3 team against tight ends over the last 5 weeks. They've held tight ends to 1 catch in 3 of the last 4 games. Although it wasn't like the greatest group of tight ends, it's still impressive you hold 3 opponents to 1 tight end catch in 3 or 4 games. That's impressive to me. They held when they met when they played the Las Vegas Raiders in Week 5. That was a shootout of a game. The Raiders put up 40 points, got the upset win. In that shootout, they held Waller to less than 50 yards. However, Waller's fantasy day was saved by a touchdown, but I do think this game will be different because I don't think the Raiders are going to duplicate what they did in Week 5 again against the Chiefs in Week 11, and I don't think Waller will duplicate that output either, even though it wasn't much of an output. He just got saved by a touchdown. So I'm putting my stake in here and saying Darren Waller is my sit of the week.
I'll stand by your stake. He's on my list as a sit of the week as well. The Chiefs are actually 8th best in the league against tight ends. They do not allow a bunch of points to tight ends. And like you mentioned, that game earlier in the year was a total shootout, and I think they found a genie in a bottle, hit lightning in a bottle with that one. I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to repeat that type of performance. It just isn't in the cards in my mind. I think it's going to be a very different looking game than what we saw earlier in the year. And Darren Waller is, again, like you mentioned, he was not great in that game, and I don't expect him to be in this game either. I don't know. He's, if anything, at best, he's saved by a touchdown once again because he's not going to put up a big yardage type
I feel like that's what they're going to be banking on is that touchdown.
Right. So I definitely think that Darren Waller is a pretty solid sit this week.
And he's probably going to be a pretty high-priced tight end as usual, so I don't know if I'd pay the money for it.
Right.
Moving on to defenses, I'll be honest with you. Defenses were a lot more fun last week when we had actually did this late enough to do to have DFS prices on them. But I generally don't know where this defense can be valued, but I think it's probably going to be someone in the middle of the road, which is why I'm picking them. It's going to be Miami against Denver. And the Broncos are allowing 10.3 fantasy points per game to opposing DSTs. A lot of that is because Drew Lock has thrown more interceptions and touchdowns on the season, which I said last week, and it's still true this week. He now has 10 interceptions to 7 touchdowns on the season. The caveat here is last week I recommend the Raiders, even though they tended to not be able to intercept the ball at all this season. They were one of the worst teams in that respect, and they still managed, I think, it was 3 interceptions against Drew Lock. Dolphins are a top 10 team in terms of interceptions, so I think they're going to do some damage here. That's why I like the Dolphins.
I'm going to add on to that because I do like the Dolphins this week. Mind you, they are a top 12 defense, but I will add on to that by saying Drew Lock has honestly been absolutely terrible in the last 5 or 6 games. He had a solid start to the year, but since he just hit a wall at some point to where I think going into last week, he'd thrown 5 touchdowns and 6 picks in the previous 4 games. And I think he added 3 more picks this week. So I think Miami Dolphins are seeing Drew Lock at the right time in his season. So I think they have a really good opportunity to get some big points. The other defense I'm going to look at, and this is one that's way down the spectrum, and I'm going to go off of just what I've seen from this team as a whole in terms of the opponent, but I'm going with the Browns defense up against the Eagles. The Eagles offense just turns the ball over like crazy. Whether it's Carson Wentz throwing picks, the Eagles just straight up died this week. Where we thought Carson Wentz and that Eagles offense was coming into form, they straight up died this week. And I don't know what happened, but they had a great opportunity and they floundered against the Giants to lose that ball game. So I think the Browns have a good opportunity against this Carson Wentz run offense, because one of the big factors is the fact that the Browns have invested a lot of draft capital in that defensive line and rushing the quarterback in Myles Garrett and Bradley Chubb. I think they've got an opportunity here to get into that backfield. And whenever you're able to get into the backfield against Carson Wentz, you're almost always able to force a fumble at least once or twice in the game. And if you can create one or 2 turnovers on top of if you can create 1 or 2 turnovers with the fumbles and then maybe get them to throw an interception as well, that's already points stacking up for your defense. So I think the Browns have a really good opportunity to put up some points against that Eagles offense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And they're going to be pretty damn cheap.
Yeah, Carson Wentz throws more interceptions than anyone in the league, not named Drew Lock. Now, Drew Lock, I think, just surpassed him this week. So,
well, there you go.
So, yeah, and he, like you said, high fumble rate there with Carson.
I believe he has the most fumbles by a quarterback in the league over the last 2 seasons. I think so. He fumbles a lot, man.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. These are the types of teams you want to target to face in terms of DSTs. The teams that tend to turn the ball over, teams that tend to allow a lot of sacks, stuff like that. But you got 2 very turnover prone teams in Denver and Eagles playing defenses that you could get for like a medium price. I'm not sure how high the Browns or the Dolphins are going to be this week. I won't be able to know until they release fantasy prices, which I think are Wednesday, I want to say. But
so, fun facts on Carson Wentz, he leads the entire league in fumbles. Not just quarterbacks, all players in fumbles. He has 9 fumbles this year. 9. So there's something to take a look at.
It reminds me of, have you seen the comebacks?
Yes.
Yes. The quarterback that had to take the ball to.
And he was second in the league in fumbles last year with 17 last season. Only one behind the league leader in fumbles in Daniel Jones with 18. So apparently quarterbacks in the NFC East love to fumble the football. So that's something that I think the Browns can really capitalize on this week.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to start calling Carson Wentz Lance Truman. Just for the comebacks reference.
I like the idea. Lance Truman over here. And to think he was starting to have a turnaround type season, and then he just fell over last week.
Did you know that movie's directed by Tom Brady?
Is it really?
Not the football player.
Okay. I was going to say, I didn't know he had time for that. I've seen that movie like 5 times. I love that movie.
It's
so bad.
Movie.
It's so bad.
It's terrible.
It's so fun, though. Oh, man.
But that's all I got.
That's all I got as well. Thank you guys for listening once again. Good luck this weekend. Andrew, thank you for joining me. And thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast as well. Check out our other podcast, The Fan Report, if you are into Detroit sports or just love hearing us talk shit about the Lions. We're starting to get into some basketball talk as well. We're talking Pistons draft also. So if you're into that.
Can't wait for Wednesday.
Same. It's going to be fun.
Which probably by the time you're listening to it, this might have already happened, but
maybe. But anyways, guys, thank you again for checking us out this week. Follow us on Twitter at RealFanReport, and we will catch you guys next week. Good luck, and if you live in the state of Michigan, stay in your houses.
Yep. Deuces.
Have a good one, guys. Peace out.
Deuces.
Have a good one, guys. Peace out.